Alright everyone, welcome to Friday... Green screen isn't working properly. Hang on. That's a bit better. Where am I? Celtic, Glasgow! And that is how the video should have gone. Me standing outside Celtic Park in the glorious Scottish summer, talking about the club that we all love. Unfortunately, I completely forgot that Celtic Park and that specific area of Celtic Park is perhaps the windiest place on the planet. And that wind meant that I ended up with a barely usable video and plenty of frustrations. Totally fucking miserable. Now that barely usable video, as I say, coupled with the fact there were a few interesting transfer stories that came out last night, and also that my body decided to wake me up at 4 AM today because it thinks it's like 1 PM. It means that I'm up early, and I thought I would just redo this whole video for you. So there you go. By the way, as I said earlier in the week, really appreciate a lot of you sticking with the channel in the close season. Numbers are holding up really well. Also trying to push on to 8,000 subscribers. I think we're like 7,300, something like that. And I found out earlier that in June so far, 53.8% of you watching our videos aren't subscribed. So if you all take a wee minute to do it, if you've not managed yet, it would be much appreciated. It's free, and it really does help me to keep going like that, boom, with the channel onwards and upwards. I think I'm still a bit kind of loopy from the flight, to be honest. That's another reason why I'm glad the video from yesterday hasn't gone out, because I literally, my flight got in to Edinburgh at like 2 PM, which is like nearly midnight as far as my body was concerned, and I said a lot of weird things in that video. I think I was very, very jet lagged at that stage. I'm kind of getting there now. But yeah, in general, it was nice to be back at Celtic Park, even if it was a bit on the windy side. See that buzz of seeing the stadium for the first time after 10 months away. It was pretty nice, and it did very quickly feel like I'd never been away. I guess the reality is that a fair lot has happened over those past 10 months. We've won a couple of trophies for a start. It's nice to see the club mentioning that outside the stadium. But yeah, generally just nice to be at Celtic Park. And the main topic of yesterday's video was going to be kind of the overall TV picture for Celtic fans going forward, because there's been a couple of wee interesting developments on that front this week. I'm going to do that at the end of this video. Before then, though, I wanted to touch on a couple of pretty sizable and interesting transfer reports. A couple of new names to talk about being linked with Celtic last night. The first one came from Mark Hendry at Football Scotland, and he's linked us with a move for Sparta Prague goalkeeper Peter Vindahl Jensen. Now, the report from Football Scotland says we are, quote, locked in negotiations with Sparta for Jensen. He's a player who's high on our summer shortlist. Football Scotland understands Brendan Rodgers is an admirer of the player and hopes to entice him to Glasgow. Now, Jensen was actually a permanent AZ Alkmaar player up until like a matter of weeks ago, actually. He joined them in the summer of 2021, actually a couple of days before we played them in that Europa League qualifier. He was on the bench for both of those matches, so the first leg at Celtic Park and the return leg in the Netherlands. He very quickly that season went on to become AZ Alkmaar's #1 goalkeeper. However, the following season he dropped back to their second choice. Halfway through that campaign, he went out to try and find game time. He went to German second division side Nuremberg, pretty big club. and then the following season went out on loan again, this time to Sparta Prague. Now that was obviously last season. Seems to have done really well there, kept a lot of clean sheets. They won the League and Cup double in Czechia, as it's known now, and as I say, clearly made a good impression there, because they then decided to sign him permanently this summer. So he's actually only signed for them permanently very recently, and it already seems like he might be moving on, or certainly Celtic want to try and sign him. We obviously have Champions League football to potentially entice him with. Sparta Prague are in the Champions League, but they have a good few rounds of qualifying to come through. He's 26 years old. I think that's a pretty good age for a goalkeeper. That's kind of, if you were to ask me an age, I think I'd want us to be looking at for a goalkeeper. I think that's it. You need someone with a bit of experience, I think, to come to Celtic. I know it's worked maybe in the past, like Fraser Forster didn't really have first team experience, and that worked out really well. I think you're looking for someone who's had a good few years at like decent sized clubs. He's played for at least 3 pretty decent sized clubs in Alkmaar, Nuremberg, Sparta Prague. And as I say, 26 years old, he's still just probably going into his peak years as a goalkeeper. 6'4" as well, pretty good presence. He's not had a full Denmark cap yet. He has been in a number of their youth squads back a few years ago. They're pretty well stocked with goalkeepers, and I think Kasper Schmeichel has pretty much had that nailed down for the entirety of his career. So it's no real, bad thing that he's not necessarily had a cap. I believe he's been in some full Denmark squads as well. He's not in their squad for the Euros though. And as I say, he won a League and Cup double last season, so I think that kind of pedigree is important as well. Yes, I've had a wee look at him on YouTube, and yes, he appears to know how to make saves, which I guess is a good thing for a goalkeeper. Beyond that, I don't really know a great deal. There doesn't seem to be too many. You usually get these kind of articles on these kind of players from various scouting websites about what they do well, what they maybe struggle with. If this is a transfer that we're looking at and we're going to progress further, obviously this is something I'll dive into. But I think at the moment with these goalkeeper reports, and I did say, I think earlier in the week, that I felt that we'd know when we saw the definitive name. We just get a feeling this is a guy who Celtic want, this is a guy who Celtic will probably sign. I'm not sure I fully get that feeling here. It certainly feels more substantial than previous rumours. Obviously, we had like Casteels and McCarthy and a few other people. This feels like we're actually, a little bit further down the line, and seems like this might be the guy we want. It just seems like it's also going to cost us a fair bit of money, I think, given that he's just been signed onto a kind of multi-year contract with Sparta Prague. Bottom line here is, if Brendan Rodgers wants him, we have to get it done. I think he ticks a few boxes as I've outlined. Let's just keep an eye on this. I think there'll be more names to come as well. But yeah, as I say, if Rodgers wants him, get him done. The other transfer report that we had last night concerns a centre-back. It comes from the Daily Mail's Stephen McGowan, and it links us with Bournemouth and Wales defender Chris Mepham. As you can see there, a fee of £8 million is already mentioned. McGowan says we have added Mepham to a list of summer signing targets. Now, Mepham is a Bournemouth player. He didn't feature much at all for them last season, as they finished 12th in the Premier League under Andoni Iraola. They had a really good season. As I say, he didn't feature much. I believe he played 10 Premier League matches in total. 6 of them were starts. They had a pretty good kind of centre-back partnership last year, I believe. Mepham also had some injury difficulties last season. He was ruled out for 12 weeks back in January with a knee injury sustained in an FA Cup win against Luton. He also had, quote, a health issue later on in the season, according to Iraola. Now, Mepham's heading into his final 12 months at Bournemouth, but he's still likely to cost us around that £8 million, which seems a fair amount for a player who's only got, a player who could move for nothing in 12 months' time, could agree a pre-contract in 6 months' time, etc. But I guess when you're looking at players in the Premier League, these are the kind of fees that you pay even for players like that. Our interest is said to be in the early stages, so there may not be a great deal in this, but I think looking at it, I know it may not be the most glamorous signing, and people, may look at Bournemouth and go, yeah, it's only Bournemouth. The guy can't even get a game for them. Why would we spend all that money on him? I think this is the kind of player, certainly in defensive positions, we should be looking at. Reminds me a lot of Cameron Carter-Vickers for some reason. Now, I know Carter-Vickers was a bit different in that he was a loan initially. I don't think a loan here would be an option with Mepham only having 12 months left in his Bournemouth deal. But just in terms of where they find themselves, clearly, and I know Carter-Vickers a few years younger as well, but clearly have ability, just maybe going through a bit of a tougher time. Can't quite nail down that, first team game time. But I just think Mepham, who apparently can play on the left side of that centre-back pairing, if we'd be able to sign him and we want to pay the money, we've got the money in the bank. He's been capped so many times by Wales. If we could pair him with Cameron Carter-Vickers, that just strikes me as quite a solid centre-back pairing. Again, Mepham is someone Brendan Rodgers will very much be aware of from his time in England. So while Brendan Rodgers may not necessarily have just gone, I want Chris Mepham, probably more likely a scout's come to him, well, list the targets, and Rodgers has looked at him and gone, yeah, I quite liked him when we played against him or whatever. I followed his career. I think if Rodgers wants him again, the club need to go out and back the manager. But I think generally I'm quite kind of quite intrigued by these two rumours. They feel to me a little bit of a change, or a big bit of a change from what we saw last season. Mepham, by the way, just like Jensen, is also 6'4", is also 26 years old, and for me that's a kind of good age for first team improvement. Basically, I know the club in recent years, well, over the last couple of seasons, have really wanted to kind of look around the whole globe. Basically, we've signed players from a number of different continents, mainly that kind of 20, 21, 22 age bracket. It's worked on occasion. Real Hatate, Dyson Maida would be another one, a kind of young player that we signed. I guess Alistair Johnson would be another one. That there's been positives there. I think last season it very clearly didn't work at all, and it just felt like we were stockpiling the squad with players from all over of a very kind of young age who just weren't ready to make any sort of impact in the first team. I think this, while we can still do that with a few signings every season, I think to have every signing like that is an issue, and we saw that last season. The kind of age of these players we've been linked with Jensen and Mepham gives me some sort of excitement, I think it's fair to say. Whether these deals come off, I'm not sure. But I think, without going all Nigel Farage here, I think sometimes looking a little bit closer to home for these key positions and looking that little bit older may be a positive move for the club. I just think you're likely to get kind of more proven players, and the sell-on value may not necessarily be there like it is for a younger player. I think we need to remember, we're a football club trying to get results here, and trying to get results in the highest level of football in the Champions League next season. We're not a money-making organisation, or that shouldn't be our main goal. Our main goal should be to get a team who can achieve results. And I think a signing like Mepham with that Premier League experience, highly rated, so many caps for Wales, would be a positive signing. Certainly more positive than someone like Gustav Lagerbielke, for example, who's that bit younger, hasn't necessarily been proven in a top league. Maybe this is the way Celtic are looking next season. I'm personally a little bit excited by. I've not cancelled myself there, have I? Good. Right, as I say, yesterday's video is going to speak a bit about the TV landscape. I'll try and fire through it relatively quickly. The big news earlier in the week was that from next season, Premier Sports will show 20 Premiership matches per season. I think it's a 5-year agreement in the UK and Ireland. The possibility of them being able to do this was basically brought about a couple of years ago. I think it was August 2022 we first heard about this. There was a new TV deal, a much criticised new TV deal between the SPFL and Sky Sports. It allowed Sky Sports to show up to 60 matches per season. I believe last season they showed 42, not including the playoffs. So basically this contract on top of the Sky Sports stuff also gave an opportunity for bundles of 10 matches to be sold to other broadcasters. Now I think Sky actually had the option to take these up first, but obviously given they're not even showing the 60, they're not going to take 70, 80, 90, etc. So when they didn't do that, the SPFL was able to sell these other matches to other broadcasters, and it has been confirmed, Premier Sports have taken up the option to show 20 matches per season. So next season, as Neil Doncaster was at pains to point out in his statement, we're going to have more Scottish Premiership matches on television than ever before. You could have up to 80. Likelihood is you're going to have about 60, with 40 odd of them being on Sky Sports and definitively 20 being on Premier Sports. So what will this mean for Celtic? Well, the main Celtic matches, the biggest Celtic matches, all our derbies, kind of season-defining games, Trophy Day, Flag Day, etc., I think will still all be on Sky Sports. Where Premier might come in for Celtic is the occasional matches, away matches that Sky don't pick up. And I think there was a couple at the start of last season. The late win we had at Fir Park when Matt O'Reilly scored, and a pretty forgettable 0-0 draw at Easter Road. From memory, those games weren't picked up by Sky. Celtic fans had to get them on pay-per-view directly from Motherwell and Hibs. So maybe next season, those are the kind of matches that Premier Sports could pick up. So I think it's fair to say you're going to need Sky Sports and Premier Sports to watch Premiership action next season. In fact, you're definitely going to need Premier Sports because they've also got the full rights to the Premier Sports Cup, which is also known as the League Cup. They also have rights to the Scottish Cup, although the BBC shows some games there too. There was actually an announcement on that yesterday as well. The Scottish FA has struck a deal with Premier Sports and BBC Scotland that will see the broadcasters continue to share TV rights for the Scottish Cup until 2029. The new 5-year agreement ensures the Scottish Cup final remains free to air, along with one semi-final, while Premier Sports have secured rights to show an additional third match in rounds 4 and 5. All well and good. So for Scottish football, watching next season, you're going to need Sky Sports, Premier Sports and the BBC. Kind of manageable, right? Well, things get a little bit more complicated and costly as we bring the European stuff into things. Now, as we know, the format of the UEFA Champions League is changing next season. That's been well documented. UEFA has these things called cycles. I think they're usually maybe 4-year cycles, 5 years maybe. And basically the cycle is how the competition will run for those number of years, and then it can't be changed until the next cycle. So we're going into a new cycle from the start of next season. That's why the new format's coming in. Cycles also bring about changes in what TV channels show matches, and there's a few changes for next season. As we know, for the last number of years, probably close to a decade now, BT Sport and then TNT Sports, as they became, have had exclusive rights to the Champions League, Europa League and Conference League. They still have the vast majority of the matches next season. They've got all the matches in the Europa League and the Conference League. We don't care about that because we're not bothering with those competitions. They also have 187 of the 204 Champions League games next season. However, the other 17 will be shown by Amazon Prime next season. and they will be so-called Tuesday first picks. So basically every Tuesday of the competition, Amazon will get the first pick of the match they want to show. Without doing Celtic down, maybe occasionally it'll be us if we're playing like maybe an English team, for example, it'll probably be us. Otherwise, I think the kind of snobbery of Celtic and Scottish football, Amazon will probably go for the big glamorous match an English team is playing. So I think the vast majority of our games will be in TNT next season still. And for me, the most interesting bit about Champions League stuff next season, and again, you may or may not know this, the BBC are actually going to have a highlight show on a Wednesday night showing all of the action from the UEFA Champions League. And I believe it's even going to be called Match of the Day. So Celtic are going to be in Match of the Day next season. That's kind of interesting, isn't it? So just to recap, next season, Scottish Premiership action will be on Sky Sports mainly, but also 20 matches on Premier Sports. The Scottish Cup will be on Premier Sports and the BBC. The League Cup will be exclusively on Premier Sports. The Champions League will be on TNT Sports and Amazon Prime, with the BBC having a highlight show. And you are probably looking at Celtic TV as well, being required for friendlies and the like. So yeah, that's the situation. Let me know what you've made of what I've been talking about on today's video. There's been a fair amount to get through. Have a lovely weekend, and yeah, we'll get back into things properly on Monday.